Namaste,
Yeah.
Manoj ji. हाँ.
Sir, namaskar, namaskar.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
Am I
yeah, you are
audible?
very much audible, sir.
Okay.
So, dear
Just check.
participant, good morning again. And now we are going to start our second session with one of the very eminent researchers, very good researchers, and with Professor L.S. Sharma. He is a professor and head Department of Management, a senior faculty, and very good researcher. So today, sir is going to share his experience on issue in academic writing. See, in the academic field, many times in our library science, actually, we are teaching, in our three planes of the knowledge dissemination, knowledge creation, actually. The ideal plane, notational, the verbal plane, ideal plane, notational plane, and the last writing plane. First of all, we thought some ideas, then verbally we communicate, then only we came to the writing space. And academic writing is definitely a very important component of the academic environment, academic activities. So, sir is going to talk with you. Sir, I welcome you in HRDC, this fifth FIP program, and we are very much thankful that when holiday you are ready to share your experience with our participant. You are our own faculty, this university own faculty, so I'm not going to detail about your biodata, publication and all, everybody we know. So I welcome you, and directly already we are late. Madam took around 10 minutes extra your class. So directly I am handing over to you for your presentation, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manoj. I'd like to share my screen. Manoj, is my screen visible?
Not yet. Yeah, it's coming, sir.
Okay.
Yes, now full screen also. It's fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Today, my topic is going to be on one of the, I would say, one of the issues which generally most of the academicians, especially in the teaching and learning field, experiences every now and then. And this is also one of my experiences. So where I wanted to share some of the issues which sometimes we overlook in academic writing. So let me start with some of these issues. I will be covering about three aspects of academic writing. One is the style of academic writing. Uh, Second is about the way how we write. The third is about how analysis is being done, or in the form of how the data is being used as an analysis. But all of these three aspects will cover into how we translate into the writing form. Okay, so let me start with my first part, which is the style of writing. Uh, we know that academic writers, or what we call as academic papers, generally comprises of two things. That is, one is what we call as an empirical paper, and others called the conceptual paper. And these are the papers which are to be read through carefully and analyzed very, very carefully. Not they are to be taken as some kind of a newspaper reading, where you read it for some time, consume, and put it aside. So generally, when we go through these academic papers, we try to go it over line by line. We try to go over and trying to find out what it's trying to convey, and we do not just skim through. So most of these writing generally tends to be longer. Uh, the paragraphs tends to be much longer, and sometimes it has some of the complex ideas which are being put in forward out there in comparison to the straightforward reports or in the form of writing which is done by the journalistic writing or creative writing. So academic, what I'm trying to say is that academic papers are more serious in nature. It may be in the form of what we call as empirical or conceptual model. Okay. Uh, the second aspect is that most of the academic writing is in the form of what we call as a formal kind of writing. Uh, you will not find slang words being used out there. Uh, in fact, some of the words that we use commonly, such as the conversational words, or what we call as conversational contractions. So I can't do, wouldn't do, shouldn't be doing, and that kind of things are not welcome in this kind of writing. Uh, so generally, it should be more of a, it's a formal presentation. So it's not in kind of an informal way of what do you call, transferring the knowledge. So it's a formal way of transferring the knowledge. So what we call as the colloquial expressions. Say, for example, we use certain words like grub for food, buck for money. So that kind of language is unwelcome in academic writing. So, so when we talk about academic writing, generally we tend to say that it is more subdued, more representative in formal like things. So, like in a formal place, how we wear our clothes. So, in academic writing, also how the way the words are being dressed up is more of a formal in nature, and it does not try to be more of exuberant, means that it's not where it is supposed to draw attention, uh, but it is to it is to transfer the ideas in a more kind of a formal way. You would see that I'll be giving some of the examples, the colorful expressions, or in terms of using the bold metaphors which are more of exemplary, or uh, which are more what do you call, more adjective in nature. These are the kind of words which are being used mostly in a creative writing, but these are rarely found in academic writing. So most of these academic writings are generally what we call as which follows a process of scientific nature. So it is more subdued in general way. Uh, Fine, which was published in 1998, cited in Golden Beagle and Locke 1997, is among a few scholars who recommend the use of metaphors and literary devices to make scientific writing. Like, of course, yes. What I mean to say out here is that it is not that metaphors cannot be used, what do you call, at all, but there are also the other viewpoints where some of the authors have also suggested that you you can also use metaphors to make more of the very dull kind of information to be transferred. So it's not that all the time it should not be used, but I mean, it should not be used extensively, but there are opinions that it also could be used out here. But scholarly articles generally tends to be more formal in nature, so the use of these colors, lively exuberance, still continues to be minority in terms of publications, in terms of research papers which are being published. So what I mean to say is that it's formal in nature, and it should be following in that way. So, for example, I've got a write up out here which says the performance of the Indian Railways was at its worst. Revenues were stagnant and costs were escalating. A series of bad years has reduced the fund balance to only rupees 149 crores. Operating ratio, which is the ratio of total working expenses minus including depreciation and pension, but excluding dividend to GOI, to Total earnings was at 98.34%, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, railways had to defer the dividend payable to the government of India. The expert group on Indian Railways, also known as Anand Mohan Committee for Railway Structuring, had already written the obituary of Indian Railways. Um, so, year 2006, within 5 years of the doomsday prophecies, the Indian Railways was back with a bang. With an operating ratio of 78.7%, it was among the most efficient railways in the world. The fund balance has ballooned to rupees 12,000 crores, and the railways were finalizing investment to the tune of rupees 350,000 crores till 2015, which is cited from Raghuram 2007. This remarkable reversal of the fortune and regaining of confidence for a public sector enterprise seems a story taken of fairy tales. So you'll see that in this writing there are uh, so many issues if we look it from an academic writing point of view. But if it see it from a creative writing point of view, it is totally acceptable. So there is a critic on this. One of the things is that, of course, the writing is very engaging. It is interesting. It captures your mind immediately, but overall, it is too dramatic and colorful in terms of an academic report. Say, for example, if you see out here, year 2001, then year 2006, both you see that there is a kind of a comparison out here, but the way how it is being expressed is somehow it's not acceptable in the form of a formal academic writing. Uh, the third critical evaluation is that it's too flashy. You see the way how it is being used out here, just like a multicolored shirt under a gray jacket. I mean, when you are wearing formals, generally we wear formal colors, not a too multicolored kind of a thing. So, and there is no congruency in the way how it is being represented out there. So, incongruousness is out there. Uh, so, somehow there is a lot of what you call disagreement is there, especially in terms of writings like bang with the railways was bang with back with a bang. So this is again something which we may consider as too much of a metaphor. Sometimes, right, written like the obituary of Indian Railways. Again, this is also a kind of a metaphor which is being used. So let's see into the other way how it is being written. So now the same paragraph written in the form of academic writing is given out here. The performance of Indian Railways was at its worst in 2001. Straightforward. Okay. Uh, a series of financial bad years in which revenues were stagnant and the cost rising had reduced its fund balance to rupees 149 crores. The operating ratio, that is given the same formula again, was 98.34%. And for the first time since 1983, Indian Railways deferred the dividend payable to Government of India. So in this one and two sentence, it has covered up most of the ideas that it wants to put forward, and straightforward without any colors, without any extra words. So the ideas have been put across. Okay. The expert group on Indian Railways 2001, also known as Anand Mohan Committee for Railways Restructuring, concluding in the same year that the public sector enterprise was financially unviable. So straightforward, whatever the Anand Mohan Committee has reported, it was being put in out here. Second paragraph talks about the second part. In the following 5 years, however, there was a significant turnaround. So in this sentence, in fact, it tells about what is going to happen. So in 2006, the operating ratio was 78.7%. among the best globally. So 78.67 operating ratio, it was considered as one of the best, maybe in comparison with the others. The balance of funds rose 80 times to rupees 12,000 crores. Earlier it was giving 12,000 crores, but it was not giving in terms of volume, in terms of how much it has risen and so on. So there is a comparison, there is some more extra information given out here. Buoyed by this, observes Raghuram 2007, Railways decided to invest up to rupees 3, 3,50,000 crores in the next 10 years. So on the basis of this kind of an improvement, the Railways has decided to invest more money in the next 10 years. And again, here is given a remark on the conclusion of this, that this is a remarkable reversal of fortunes for a public sector enterprise. So if you compare these two paragraphs in comparison with the earlier two paragraphs, you see there is a big difference of writing. So this also makes a difference of whether a paper is being accepted for publication, or when after reading through these papers are being what do you call assessed by the evaluators, you will find a big difference. Okay. All right. So let's look into the critical review of this one. So So you can see that the first version had expressions like the obituary of Indian Railways. So that has become the financially unviable, which is more of a formal way of saying that the company is not doing well. Back with a bang, that is again being replaced with some of the formal word like a significant turnaround. Then the expressions like a story being taken off fairy tales, that has been dropped altogether, because that is not considered as appropriate. And and this has followed more or less more of the formal conventions of writing, academic writing, um, in some of the conventions that has been generally accepted. Okay. And you can see that most of the convention is that one of the main convention is citing some of the sources of data, from where you have got this data, where have you taken this data. If you have found it out by yourself, is it from your primary data, or if it's taken from a secondary data, what is the source of your data. So the conventions of academic writing generally says that if you have borrowed anything, those borrowed should be repaid in the form of what we call as citations. So maybe some phrases, some words that others have already written, or some other claims that has been made by somebody, which you also want to make a claim on the basis of that, or you want to cite that claim. So these are also needs to be put into as a form of citations, or in the form of citing, or what we call as the norms of academic convention, academic writing conventions. So you'll find that some of the sightings are out there. Uh, and again, you'll find that these kind of things will be different when you look into the writing which is being done in a research article or in a scientific journal, or if you see it from a journal magazine like the Time magazine or the Economist. So out there, you will not find much of these citations being given out there. But even if in the magazines like Time and Economist also, they themselves also have to do a lot of what you call meticulous uh, finding out the facts, whether they are not just borrowing it from the air, or is it from the reliable resources. So therefore uh, they have to what do you call uh, make the convention, they have to follow the conventions of academic writing. So most of the scientific journals generally they have a long list of references which are generally given at the end of the article or at the end of the page. While in these magazines you will not find any of this, maybe except one or two where some considerable research has been done out there. So, so the detail, this referencing of academic writing also reflects this central characteristics of this scientific inquiry. That is the objectivity of my search, the objectivity of relying on the sources of others, relying on the sources of empirical data rather than on the personal opinions which are being given by others, even if the personal opinions are taken, whether it taken on the basis of scientific procedure of selecting the interview and the process of what you call aligning it with some of the findings with some of the other earlier studies. So the foregrounding of ideas, de-emphasizing of the people and emotions. So these are some of the characteristics which are being highlighted here. The process of
has stopped. This meeting is being recorded.
okay, all right. Am I still audible?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's still audible.
Uh, I,
Continue,
I
sir.
thought there was a break in between. Okay, thank you then. So, so in some of these writings, so we try to avoid the personalization in terms of, especially in academic writing, we try to avoid the personalization in terms of I, my, our, and things like that. But in some of the social sciences, where the writers use the concept of third person to refer themselves, the writing as a third person is that. The individual is not mentioned, but somehow uh, the process of conveying that as a third person is being done. But especially in some of the humanities, where the first person may be required in the form of, if you're writing in the form of a in the form of your action research, or uh, in the form of where the individual is immersed himself or herself in the process of research, or what we call as an ethnographical studies. So in these ethnographical studies as well as in the action research, the the personalization form might be there, but care is also has to be taken that biasness does not come in out there. And how do you check your biasness out there? Okay, so one of the hypothetical example which is given out here is, one line is that this paper discusses the challenges of teaching ethics to MBA students and about the author's exploratory attempt at exposing students to managers jail for corporate fraud. Okay, now using the author is here it is being used as a third person. Here it does not say the research. I mean, you may also say something like the researcher, but it does not say about my study and our study. So this is another hypothetical example of using this explain trying to avoid some of this personalization. Okay, so so the writers sometimes they also use some of the generalization in terms of we, our experience, our hypothesis, and so on. uh, this tends to be started using quite a lot nowadays, but uh, from my side I would prefer that most of the writers should try to avoid this and try to use it in terms of the third person. Okay, So this is another form where it is being rewritten is in this paper we discuss the challenge of teaching ethics to MBA students and about our exploratory attempt at exposing students to managers jail for corporate fraud. So this is again another alternative. Okay, one of the reason why we try to avoid the first person is that if there is an excessive use of this first person, uh, it tries to give the impression that the author is trying to present more of his personal opinions or personal views rather than focusing on the objective of your objectiveness of your study. So the focus is mostly on the emphasis is given more on the writer, not on the ideas which is focused on the paper. So it tends to be more of personalized in nature. So it's better to avoid too much excessive use of this. Say for example, when I computed the average, I found out this that so it is trying to becoming me and my I. These are becoming more coming out more in the front. Okay. So if you change in certain structure of writing like this, when the average was being computed, it was found that so this is where the third party or where the personalization is being avoided. So the overall tone of writing it seems to be focused more on the idea. These are the small things, but it is very helpful uh, in making your papers more scientific in nature and more non-biased. So when we see these uh, certain things like I and we coming out too much, it becomes more personalized in nature. So that's why we have said that I and we, of course, it is being permitted, but it is better to avoid them as much as possible and try to use them as less as possible.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sir, continue, sir.
Right.
There is some
Yes, sir.
problem in
Okay.
recording thing, so ignore that and continue.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So the next one is about the writing itself. The writing that we say that the academic writing is dispassionate in nature means that of course the way how we are doing is of course is passionate in nature, but the way how you are expressing it should be dispassionate, meaning that we are convinced about something, but if you are passionate and too excited about it, then the biasness may creep in out there. So it's a way of avoiding the biasness which may come in your writing. So it's a kind of a check and balance. So being dispassionate in the writing process, I mean, where it is being put forward, the way how it is being expressed, so that may what you call tone down your passion out there. So uh, the ideas are being conveyed, but it should not be too passionate about. So it is more of a what we call as an observer who is an impartial person. Okay, so you are more like you're putting forward it as an impartial observer. Okay. So impartial observer means that when we are presenting something, we are presenting about the pros and cons of the position that is out there. It is not that everything is always black or everything is always white in the real life. So when we are putting in ideas, when we are putting in certain critical evaluations, it is not that everything is always too positive or too negative. So we must always present the pros and cons of the position that we are holding, and we should also give evidence that support both the positions. Okay, so and of course in the later part we may find that some of these what you call we may stand uh, on which one is more stronger. Okay. Sometimes you may also may find some inconvenient data. Okay. Uh, so if you find some of the inconvenient data, means some of the data which does not go along with your earlier perception or earlier what you have thought about, okay, and which is kind of discordant to what you have already opined about. So, but these things you must not suppress at all. Of course, this is also from the point of view of the ethics point of view also, that you cannot avoid, you cannot disregard those data which are inconvenient. Okay. uh, which may not give a very good conclusion to your work also, which may bring a different perspective to your work. So if these things happen, we still I mean, you are still supposed to represent those also. uh, Most of the readers may or may not agree with your position or your interpretation, but what you have found out is what you have found out. uh, that is your study, so that's why it really does not matter whether the reader agrees or not. Okay. So uh, it's not that everybody has to agree with your position or your interpretation. Okay. So there several individual has their own opinions, and they may have their own viewpoint also. So it really does not matter. So that's why you should not suppress data. In fact, that should be maybe considered as one of the areas where some of the future studies may be done. Okay. The credibility of an academic writer, generally it increases when the readers find that your writing is more objective in nature, and you are totally dispassionate about uh, in the way how you have presented. Okay. So that's why the credibility of those papers which you find in the well-known, highly cited journals will find that most of the papers are dispassionate in nature. They are more focused on the objectives, and the individual researchers' opinions does not come in out there much, and you'll find that them to be more toned down but focus on the study itself. I have one example out here, some of the ways of how the academic writing is being done. The first example, this one is that this is about the Tata Nano, which was being introduced. Uh, the paragraph says the whole world was waiting with bated breath to have a glimpse of the sub $3,000 car produced by Tata Motors. The car was conceptualized and designed indigenously in India. Uh, though the Western media reacted with skepticism with regard to the car meeting the safety and pollution control norms, this is seen more as a knee-jerk reaction to the threat of India and China overtaking them in the near future in all spheres. Okay. You'll find a lot of adjectives out here. You find a lot of metaphors out here. Uh, so I don't believe this is going to be an academic writing. The second example is that it is an irrefutable fact that the Indians are one of the most intelligent people on the earth. This again, if this sentence is highly, what you call, um, highly exaggerated in nature. The world's largest publicly funded CSIR, which is the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, labs are finding it difficult to recruit scientists due to shortage. Okay. So you have two conflicting viewpoints in this again write-up out here. This is taken from R&D in Indian industry, its implications on the human capital, one of the students' assignment. Uh, so you can see these two both writings sees you see a lot of statements which are not acceptable in the form of academic writing. Okay, so you see a lot of over enthusiasm out there. Uh, what you call unacceptable statements like the what you call the previous one were irrefutable fact that Indians are the most intelligent people. So this is again you're beating yourself too much of yourself, um, blowing your own trumpets too much. So which is not the kind of formal kind of writing. Then the second aspect is that the tone has to be very, very cautious and uh, tentative in nature, rather than you have to be categorical. Categorical means we are the best and things, what do you call, putting it into certain categories. uh, in most of the writing, especially in humanities and social sciences, uh, evidences is extremely unlikely to be overwhelmingly that one can arrive at a conclusion with absolute certainty, right? What it means to say is that, especially in humanities and social sciences, you cannot find certain categorical result which is absolutely, what do you call, absolutely put it into some kind of a category out there, or what we call as an absolute certainty. And that's why, in fact, in most of the studies in humanities and social sciences, when we do a test of hypothesis, we generally take about 95% level of significance. So, but in most of the scientific studies, you'll find that the level of significance that is being taken is 99% or 99.5 or 99.9%. If it's some of the medical sciences, will be 99.9%. Okay, so there is I mean, even that 5% is a lot of room for where you cannot categorize into certain findings in the form of that. Okay, so the sample studied, especially in humanities and social sciences, the sample that we take is may not be, what you call, it may be inadequate. It may not be representative of the whole population. There are several factors where we cannot control this sample that we take. So that's why some of the, it can never be compared with the true, what you call, scientific physical sciences researchers, where the actual experiment is being done in the laboratory at all. So that's why the difference of in terms of level of significance. Okay, so and that's why we cannot take categorical claims like this. So that's why one of the reason is that we cannot use highly, what you call, categorical tone. So we have to use a tone which is cautious in nature. So that's why words like this seems to suggest that this goes to appears to be like, this is likely to be read, it may be considered, or it may be assumed. So that kind of tone is being used out here. So the second aspect of academic writing is that being dispassionate also comes in from this kind of writing. So we have to tone down our words that we use. Uh, okay, this is again one example of data analytics where one of the students has written. Okay. The popular belief among the media and general public is that voting patterns are usually determined by the gender, race, or age of the candidates rather than their political ideologies and agenda. So the sentence says that uh, the belief among the media and general people is that the voting patterns of the people is determined by whether the candidate is a male or a female, from which race it's coming from, or the age of the candidate, rather than what is the political ideology and what are the agenda that they have. Okay, the model which we develop above seems to point against these beliefs. So they have tested a model, they have developed a model, and in this model, when they tested it, they found out that the result seems to go against this belief. So the earlier belief, it is saying that the people believe that voting patterns are determined by the gender of the candidate, the race of the candidate, and the age of the candidate, not the ideological political ideology and agenda. But the finding does not seem to agree with this. Okay, that's what he's saying in the second line. Using this, we do not claim that these factors have no role to play in individual voting behavior. Now you can see this, the third line says, again, is pros and cons. They have found out something else, but again, they are saying the cons also. Rather, our interpretation of these results is that such features of an individual are overpowered by larger political and socio-economic issues, which ideally should be in the case of the case of the candidate. be the case in a democracy. So in a democracy where the socioeconomic issues plays more important role than the the gender, race, and age of the candidate. So UC has given the three perspectives out here. What is their finding? Okay, then again there are some finding which says that it does not totally agree with this. It says there are also finding which claims that these factors also play some role out there. But again, it's coming to the third point where the what should be the ideal situation. That means that the candidate, I mean, the voters should be more, the individuals should be more of I mean, more aligned towards the political and social issues, which are the ideal thing which is expected from a democracy. So this is being taken from one of the analysis and write up on the trends in US presidential elections in 2008. So, so, so the writer out here is very much careful that is not making a categorical statement out of this finding out here. Okay, so the way how the analysis is being done is very, very systematic, and everything has been comprehensive out there, and they are careful not to make a categorical statement. So that's why you'll find some of the phrases which are being used out here, like the voting patterns are usually determined. Okay, then he says the models seem to point against these beliefs. He does not say the model do not point and things like that. Okay, so we do not claim these factors have a role to play. Again, here do not claim is again what the critical evaluator says is that this is not something. This is where he has made a mistake out here. Okay. Uh, like in the last one, he says. When they move beyond analysis of data into their socio-political opinion about what ought to happen. So here the researcher is what do you call, the researcher is giving his opinion. So that should not have happened out there. So one has to be careful. Okay, you may have a view, okay, but it should not translate into the kind of giving an opinion out there. Okay. Yeah. So he says that the point that is given at the end is inappropriate because the paper is about the US elections. Okay. So it's not an evaluation of what trend is good, what trends are bad for the US government or democracy in general. So the last opinion seems to be a bit way off from your objective of your study. So, so that's why they said that it should be always focused on your objectives and try to avoid from that. Okay. So the critic has said is that uh, the analysis is good, okay, but the last sentence is not related to your analysis. Well, the next point, the next issue is about giving out the same ideas to everyone. Okay, so the best kind of academic writing is what gives every reader the same meaning. So you have to use words and you have to use such phrases which will give you the same meaning to everyone. Okay, of course it is difficult. Uh, So when you give certain kind of writing, the writing should represent what you want to say and what it wants to be reflected. So for example, here is two statements that is being given, and these two statement has different meanings. Okay. So architecture is life and architecture is you. Second is psychoanalysis is life and psychoanalysis is you. So when you try to get an meaning out of these two sentences, you may get several meaning according to the individual and according to the individual's concept of both the studies, both the discipline. So They may have different meanings, but still they are true, of course. But that should be avoided. Uh, meaning that you should try to use words which have. I mean, when the readers try to read and when they interpret, it should be uh, it should be easy to interpret, and it should not able to. I mean, they should not give an conflicting meaning altogether. Okay, the next one is the next issue is the use of metaphors. We have talked about the metaphors also earlier. Uh, Especially in academic writing, using metaphors is not accepted uh, because uh, it gives a different meaning to the reader altogether. So it's better to avoid. One of the examples that we have given out here is Bangalore is the Silicon Valley of India. Uh, so it has different meaning altogether. So it is better to avoid giving such kind of uh, what do you call metaphors, because the readers will interpret in different meaning. Okay. There are also several words where things like words expressions which are ambiguous in nature. Puns again are words which has dual triple meanings. Okay, so these are also not acceptable in academic writing. For example, Mark Twain has used this ambiguous expression as well as puns out here. uh, so this again is not acceptable in terms of academic writing. uh, for example, Mark Twain wrote out here, last week I stated this woman was the ugliest woman I've ever seen. I have since been visited by her sister and now wish to withdraw that statement. Uh, so the second line again says the sister which who has come to visit is more uglier than. But again, so that kind of or it may be the other meaning. So it is a bit more ambiguous in nature, and depending on how you want to interpret, you can interpret. But again, this is not acceptable for academic writing. Uh, yes, phrases like rose is a rose is a rose. The world is multilucious and puddle, wonderful, intriguing words, expressions which means different meaning altogether. So all these are not acceptable for academic writing. But of course, if you are from literary, these may be used for your analysis. But even out there, also in the analysis, this kind of expressions is not accepted. Okay. Then there are several phrases which we commonly use every day, such as many. Many means how many. Quite a few means what is a quite a few. Shortly. So these are the words which are very much elastic in nature. Means many could be many or some many. Okay. Quite a few could be how much. So these are also ambiguous in nature. So we should try to avoid and we should try to qualify these words. Okay. So so we should try to bring in in some form of percentage and things like that. Okay. All right. Then another form that we generally tend to sometimes miss out is uh, not trying to look from the international reader's point of view. So whenever we are writing something, we always assume our audience to be only the Indians. But nowadays, I mean, your journals are being accessed by everywhere. I mean, we put up our papers in the ResearchGate and what do you call uh, Google Scholar and so on. So you have several other people reading these research papers. Okay, so for these international readers, the symbols that we are using may be a little bit ambiguous to them. They may not be clear. Say, for example, the dollar sign and the rupee sign. Okay, some of the countries when they are reading through, they may not be what do you call? They may not able to understand uh, which uh, which currency is it being talked about. Okay, so that's why we need to use the internationally accepted norms of writing these words. Okay, so for example, dollar could be Australian dollar and US dollars. So it is better to write it in a form which will differentiate these symbols from the other countries. So wherever the paper is being written out there, say for example, I have taken the example of rupees. The rupee is being used in India, Pakistan, as well as in Nepalese. So if somebody is doing a research both in India and Nepal, uh, then the currency that he is using, is it the Nepalese currency or is it the Indian currency? So we need to define this. So it's better to use the internationally accepted uh, the the symbols, which is the USD for US dollar, or the Australian dollar, A dollar or AUD, or for the Indian rupee, the INR, or for the Pakistan rupee, PKR, or for the Nepalese rupee, NPR. So in this way, we are able to differentiate, and for the international reader, it becomes easier to understand these. So yes, the main idea is to clear the mind of the reader. Okay. Sometimes we also use these words that many and a small percentage, a very small percentage, and so on. So we need to clarify these also. Okay. Say, for example, one write-up in one sentence says a large number of students. So what is the large number? So it's taken around 39.2%. Stated that caste was not a consideration in team formation. This, however, is not borne out of by the small percentage of groups, that is 7%, uh, that are socially and ethnically diverse. So if you're using such phrases, many, a very small percentage or a small percentage, try to quantify the, what do you call, and then quantify in terms of percentage or in terms of numbers and so on. Okay. So this also is again a way to give clarity to the reader. All right. Then sometimes we have some of the common words that we use. Okay, so some of the common words that we use, but in a research paper, sometimes these common words may be uh, some of our major objective of our study. So, for example, effectiveness of this, effectiveness of that. Okay, so that also may be again in order to remove the clarity. I mean, in order to make it more clarity, it may be defined in terms of certain ways. Say, for example, in this paper, Vikalp, which is a management journal published by Indian Institute of Management, says effectiveness for the purpose of this study has been concretized in terms of the impact of mobile advertising on the purchase decision of the consumer. Tripathi and Siddiqui, 2008, page 48. Now, effectiveness is a very common word which we use every now and then. But for this research paper, it says that effectiveness means effectiveness of the impact of mobile advertising on the purchase decision of the consumer. So effectiveness means this. So that is being defined out here. So this common word, when we are reading through this paper, effectiveness means this, not anything else. Okay. So in this way, the reader is getting the reader is being clarified, okay, of that particular common word which is being used. Okay, but if you have certain elaborate definitions, things like intellectual property rights. Okay, now this is an intellectual property right which is being defined by defined by some of the authors, as well as um, the authors on the intellectual properties, uh, the authorities on the intellectual properties, which defines as ideas, inventions, and creative expressions on which there is a public willingness to bestow the status of property. those ideas, inventions, and creatives activities which can be considered as in property. And any vital information can have a commercial value, and the person who thought of the idea for the first time or the person who created the knowledge work has the right to claim ownership like any other asset he holds. It is the purpose, its purpose is to prevent unauthorized copying and misuse. So this is taken out from R&D in pharmaceutical industry, challenge and opportunities from IPR and globalization. So here also, in order to clarify what is IPR means, so here gives a total definition as well as further explanation of IPR also. Okay, so from where it is being taken, the source is being cited out here. The writer further defines this by explaining how it is being used out here. Okay, and uh, yes, and the other way that how we can clarify these is by the use of these pictures and charts, which is in the form of we using tables and graphs and figures out there. Uh, but again, if you use too many of them, again the reader might be lost or overwhelmed by these. Okay, so charts makes it easy, figures makes the what you call the whole idea to be conveyed very easily. But again, you have to use it. Uh, you have to use it as a tool to give clarity to what you want to say. Okay. All right. Okay. Then the last part that is coming in about the analysis part is that what we see in academic writing is that uh, there are three processes generally that takes place in academic writing. Of course, the beginning is the description. Second is narrating uh, the phenomena, and finally the explanation of these. Okay, uh, and these are interdependent. Yeah, yes, these are interdependent of each other. Uh, Means you cannot start with explaining an objective first. You have object, event, process, or behavior first. You have to describe them or you have to narrate them first, then later on we can go into the explanation of these. So they are interdependent of each other. Okay, but again, by just describing or by narrating something, again it does not make it into an academic writing. Okay, so there is again an attempt to explain what has been, I mean, by analyzing all those descriptions and narrations. Okay, so if you merely list or describe fake facts, you are creating a catalog or a laundry list, not an analysis. Yes, sometimes what happens is that in order to describe the process and in order to scientifically prove that our process is done in a scientific manner, we tend to describe more. And finally, in the form of it becomes more like a laundry list or trying creating a kind of a catalog. So that is not an analysis at all. So we have to analyze them so that we can bring out meaningful meaning from our description. Okay, but again, if you give them too much of facts and too much of description details, again you are not enlightening the reader, but instead what you are doing is that you are giving them too much of burden to assess those. Okay. uh, we cannot use suspenseful narration or vivid description because these are the part of the writing of used by the creative writers of fiction as well as report writing of journalism, uh, which tries to engage the authors. uh, I'm not going to the colorful words which are being used. All right, so the first two parts, which is narration and descriptions, Uh, in academic writing, when we're using this narration and descriptions, both are factual in nature, means these are based on facts or data. Okay. So when this academic writer is explaining about an experiment or describing the kind of instruments that is being used, uh, the main purpose is uh, to give a clear picture, to give a scientific process is being built on, and yeah, the scientific process is being taken up so that the reader is aware of the focusedness of the objective of the study. Okay. And so that to give more clarity about how the experiment is being done, or how what kind of instruments is being used to evaluate. Okay. So that later on somebody who wants to replicate the same experiment or to do the same kind of study again, so that it can be replicated. Uh, Second is when the writer reviews the literature, the existing literature. Uh, what the writer is doing is that they are trying to describe the existing knowledge. Okay. And on the basis of this existing knowledge, the researcher is trying to build up an argument on this. Okay. Is it still standing? The finding of this particular researcher that it has done, is it still standing, or does it need to be modified? Uh, so all those arguments needs to be built up from those description and narration. Okay. So description and narrations are basically the foundations of this conceptualization, the explanation, or theory building. So on the basis of this, our research is going to be built up. Say, for example, the next paragraph details about the tools that is being used. Okay, the questionnaire that is being used by the researcher in order to collect information. So this is the example. The questionnaire was structured along with the guidelines given by Franz and Roby, 1986, and some other relevant literature. So the questionnaire is being taken up mainly from Franz and Roby, as well as some other questions from some other based from other literature. It incorporated questions regarding the independent and dependent variables, that is user satisfaction, IT use, organizational structure, and information system performance, along with the enablers and inhibitors of IT use. So the dependent variables as well as the independent variables comprising of the user satisfaction, the IT use, organizational structure, and information system performance, along with some other variables which are enablers and inhibitors of IT use. Okay, so these are the things that are being taken as the variables. Right? The issues regarding top management and IT management were also included in the questionnaire. So the questionnaire is not only about the general people, but the issues relating with the top management level and the other people were also included in the other management level in the IT industry were also included for this questionnaire. Then it says in the Likert scale was used in formulating the questionnaire, in which the respondents were asked to state their preference on a continuum. So it says a Likert scale is used in a continuum in a basis from 1 to something. So it says no effect, low, medium, high, very high, and none. That means he's used very little and moderately. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 scales with 9 anchor points were being used out here. So the answers of this category where does mutually exclusive to the respondents have to state only one choice against an item. So against an item, they have to choose only one. An attempt was also made to minimize the bias in the language of the questionnaire. So in order to avoid biasness in of the language, so they made an attempt. An attempt may be that they might have done a pilot pilot questionnaire. So the pilot what you call project might have been done, where some of the questionnaires were given out to the some of the respondents, and any errors were being found out were being again rectified. So the attempt is being made to reduce the biasness of the language or some of the things that are not being understood. So you can see in this paragraph the way how this tool is being used is, I mean, step by step being expressed out here. So the questionnaire, so how the questionnaire was being set up, where most of the content was being taken up from, what are the variables that it is trying to ask for. Then it has also asked about the requirements of the several levels of management, the recording of the what do you call, the responses in the form of Likert scale, and the process of what do you call, removing the biasness in the language. So so you can see this, that in this description there is no color, there's no expressions, there's no formative what do you call. So the questionnaire is straightforward as it is. So the description, you can see that uh, the readers can understand very easily. Okay, so this is about the description. Description is relating with the uh, into this one is about some other thing about the intellectual property rights again. So I'll not go into this. I think I just have around 15 minutes, so let me try to go into the last part of, yeah, I'm coming into this one, yes. So the last part about is about the analysis of data. Okay, so sometimes what happens is that instead of analyzing the data, sometimes what we do is what we call is data dumping takes place a lot more. So, and especially the core function of the core soul of academic writing is what we call as this analysis. Okay, and the analysis is basically where what you have done earlier as theory building or your conceptual development, which has been described earlier, that is being analyzed out here. Okay, so description and narration, that is preparing the reader for this aspect of research, what we call as the writer's analysis. Okay, so this is where certain claims are going to come out. Yes, this is where the certain logical conclusions are going to come out. This is where some of the research questions are going to be answered. Uh, so this is the phase where uh, your conceptual ideas or your empirical constructs in the form of hypotheses all are going to be uh, explained and what you call examined out here. Okay, so whether your claim is going to be uh, fall very strong or is going to be short, it all depends on the quality of your analysis. Okay, so quality of analysis, how you're going to do out here. Okay, so Rosals and Reimers says that in analytical writing, there is an expectation of evaluation of ideas, taking up a position, then uh, developing reasons with examples, and finally organizing the material logically. Okay, so what we are expecting in this phase is that you're going to evaluate whatever the constructs that you have had. Okay, then on the basis of that you're going to take up a position, and if you're taking up those positions on the basis of reasons and examples, you're going to analyze in terms of pros and cons, and finally uh, what do you call, you're going to organize this material in a logical manner. Excuse me. I'm sorry. There were some students who was visiting the departmental building. Okay, so these are the ways why this is the way how the analysis is to be taken up. Okay, so the analytical writing is going to be built around this analysis. So evaluating ideas, taking up positions and explaining those positions, and finally, again, representing in the form of organizing on the form of materials, this logical deduction. Okay. Uh, the following is the example. It's taken from an article written by two students. So this is the example. Okay. India currently spends 4.5% of its GDP on infrastructure, as against China, which spends around 10%. There is a broad consensus among political circles that India has to spend at 10% level by India to serve 2007. The Indian government estimates that investment of around 320 billion is needed by 2012 to upgrade the country's creaking roads, ports, and airports on the road 2007. Creaking again is an metaphor. I will not agree to that. While India has the second largest road network in the world, spanning over 3.3 million kilometers, the majority of the roads are two lanes or less and are poorly maintained, with annual growth rate projected at 10 to 15% for passenger traffic and 15 to 18% for cargo traffic. An estimated 50 billion investment is required over the next 5 years to improve the road infrastructure. This is taken from Ministry of Finance, note dated. Uh, similarly, Similarly, Indian Railways, which is the world's fourth largest rail network with over 63,000 kilometer routes, Indian Railways, 2007 has been growing at an over 9% and 7% in freight and passenger traffic respectively during 2004 to 2006. This is in sharp contrast to the historical trend of 3 to 4% growth rate. Indian Railways, non-dated again. And on the aviation front, India is witnessing 15% annual growth in passenger traffic and 20% annual growth in cargo traffic, Ministry of Finance mandated. And with more airlines crisscrossing the Indian skies, even the basic ground facilities are not acceptable standards. These realities expose the glaring gap and urgent need for infrastructure in the Indian transportation arena. So this is taken from Public-Private Partnership Forum, Bridging the Infrastructural Gap in India, Lessons from Transportation Sector, student assignment again. So you can see that the author's claims, that is, India needs to invest massively and urgently in infrastructure. This is given in the last sentence of the second paragraph. Okay. And this is uh, this is the first level of support is in a significant gap in infrastructure investment between India and China. So why does he takes into this claim? This claim is being taken on the basis of certain reason, and the reason is given out here. Say, for example, out here he says that India currently spends 4.5% of its GDP on infrastructure as against China, which spends around 10%. Okay, so India spends 4.5%, China spends 10.5%. So there is a need to develop if you want to be in growth rate as comparison to China. So that is the claim that he has taken. So the first level support, okay, so comparison between India and China. Now, the second level support is coming in from the high amount which Indian government estimates is required for the next 5 years. So for the next 5 years, we require around $320 billion to fund India's infrastructure. The third level support is coming from the way how the growth is going on in terms of the Indian roads, rail, and air traffic. Okay, so the data begins with the difference in India and China. Then the government is estimating how much there is going to be a growth in the next 10 years. Okay. Then uh, then they have arranged in such a way that there is a significance of this need for development of infrastructure. Uh, if there is no such claims, then the writers have to put in data which is irrelevant to this claim. So, and when they do such kind of thing, then data dumping takes place out there. Okay. Say, for example, one instance of data dumping out here that is being given is that an estimated 50 billion investment is required over the next 5 years to improve the road infrastructure. So the critic says that this sentence is unnecessary, and it also breaks the continuity from the second paragraph, which deals with the growth of the traffic. Okay, so you'll also notice that such figures are not given for rail and air traffic. So there is an incongruous form of data dumping is being done out here. Okay. So here is another one which is given out here. The same thing, why India needs PPP. Despite being one of the fastest growing economies of the world, public infrastructure in India is in poor shape. Indian ports still average a turnaround time of 4.72 days. Long queues at the airports are a common sight, and the conditions of the road network is functional at best. We lose around rupees 200 billion per annum due to congestion, which can be attributed to poor highway development. While Indian aviation has been growing about 18% per annum, there is a little growth in supporting infrastructure. According to Jain et al., Delhi and Mumbai airports are handling twice as much as traffic as they are designed for. India's average power consumption per capita for the period 1996 to 2000 was 359 kilowatt hour, compared to China's 717 kilowatt hour and Malaysia's 2378 kilowatt hour. The DEA and ADB report estimates that power shortage costs India about US dollar 68 billion. These shortages and losses have severely limited our prospects on all fronts, especially in the current high growth period. You can see this, it's talking about the congestion in the ports and how the ports are not functioning that well. But in between, you see there is an power consumption is being compared between India, China, and Malaysia, which again does not seems to be appropriate. Okay. And according to the Government of India, Ministry of Finance, Department of Economic Affairs report on PPP, Planning Commission estimates a requirement of $320 billion US dollars for investment in core infrastructure over next 5 years. The Committee on Infrastructure Financing, as quoted by the same report, has an increase these estimates to US dollar 384 billion in May 2007. This means an average of US dollar 77 billion dollars per year. The only way India can achieve this much investment is making use of private funds via PPP model. So you can see a lot of data dumping takes place out here. Uh, Say, for example, the first paragraph, it says, despite being one of the fastest growing economies of the world, public infrastructure is in India is in poor shape. So this paragraph is not giving any kind of comparison except the case of this electricity consumption. Okay, and we don't know how bad is the turnaround in the ports for 4.7 to do 7.2 4.7 to 72 days, because this needs to be compared with the other ports. Okay. Uh, then the final claim in the last sentence is that the only way India can achieve this is investment through private funds via PPP model. Okay. So there is a lot of weakness out here. Uh, like, is the final claim, is it a personal opinion? Does it give some kind of a data comparison? Uh, is it being supported by some other data from other findings? Okay. So, we need to be very, very careful about writing what is relevant and what is irrelevant. So when we are analyzing something And when claims are being made, those claims should be what you call cited, and comparisons also should be done. The next one is, I have another paper out here, but I'll not go through this because my time is about to be over. So let me just come to the concluding part. Let me just take up this last one. Okay. All right. Let me just take up this last one, last example. This is relating with the mission of the government of India to create biofuels, uh, and this write-up is about that. Okay. All right. However, the government's execution of the national biodiesel mission, which depends on the extensive cultivation of Jatropha, has been far from satisfactory. It has exempted biodiesel from excise duty, but not managed to get the states to exempt it from the VAT. Although it is offering special subsidies to companies cultivating Jatropha in rural areas and encouraging sugar mills to make biofuels out of molasses they generate, it has not established a minimum support price for Jatropha oilseeds, nor has it ensured timely payments to farmers cultivating Jatropha. Not surprisingly, they do not consider Jatropha cultivation to be financially viable. Because of all this, there is no large-scale cultivation. This is taken from Gonzalez, October 2006. Uh, so whenever in these paragraphs, we see that whenever they make a claim, data is presented in the form of support. Okay, if you say India is the largest producer of wheat, so we need to give a support out there. Okay, so without support, then the claim has no value. Okay, so Indian government's response to its growing oil import has been to promote biodiesel through cultivation of Jatropha, but the government's execution has been unsatisfactory. So again, here there is a claim, but how it is being unsatisfactory, so that is not given. Citation is not given out here. So it's a form of what we call as a data is being dumped without exactly knowing how to respond to this. Okay. Uh, is it being done directly, deliberately, or oversight? So that we need to find it out. Okay. So if you are a knowledgeable reader, they usually question these claims and conclusions. So claims are very, very important. So that's why I said that in academic writing, one of the major things, as I begin in the initial stage, said whenever there is a claim, the claim needs to be supported with certain citations. Okay, so these are the things that I wanted to share with you all.
Thank you,
So
sir. It
thank
was
you.
a very interesting presentation from you. We got one question. If you see in chat box, or if you tell, I may read.
Okay. Uh,
Should I read, sir?
yes, please read.
Yeah, sir. Sometime we have to collect data from government office for the
Uh-huh.
purpose of study. For example, I need some data from SSA for
Mhm.
school information. And if they deny to provide information, then
Mhm.
what can I do to collect accurate data to compare field data and in government records?
Mhm.
This question is from Sadiq Ahmed.
Okay. One of the method that we use to collect data for the research purpose is that through RTI. If you do through RTI and give your reason why you are collecting data for research, there is no point that they cannot deny the data. And if they even if they deny, we can go to the higher authority for for giving the data. So this is one of the method that we use, and there is no nothing wrong in that. So although it may take some time, but RTI is one of the best way to collect data.
Once RTI is filed, they have to respond.
They have to
They cannot.
respond.
They cannot. And that
Yes,
too is time bound.
yes,
So that is the worst way to go for. But
yes.
if you tell that we are going to file RTI, I think they share.
Yes, they may even
They
give
will share.
the data directly.
So, sir, no more question means you explained everything with examples. So when you presented the topic, they might be having some question, but with your examples, those questions were answered already, I think. So they're not putting any further questions.
Right,
So
sir.
thanks for sharing your time on a holiday with us. You are sitting in your department, so attending
Yes.
office on a holiday. So thank you for your time and a very good presentation, which is enlightening for all of us. So thank you, sir. And with this, we'll close this
Thank
session.
you very much, Batan sir. Okay, thank you, everyone.
So, dear friends, we'll take a lunch break of half an hour and we'll start at 1:30 sharp. And our next presentation is from Professor Diwakar Tiwari. He is Dean of Physical Sciences in Mizoram University. He is Director of IQAC. So we'll have a talk from him on NIRF and all the rating agencies. So meet. Let us meet all of us at 1:30 sharp. So we start. Okay. So now you can go and take your lunch and assemble at 1:30. Thanks.